Hey, so when I was in high school, I was in football for a season. And one of the things that the coach would always say before he played a game, or even during practice, he'd always say, if you want to win, you have to want it enough. And that always stuck with me, but in a confusing sense. I was like, well, how does that work? Like, if you want to win a game, you just he'll talk about teams that went undefeated or whatever, had a great season, and he said, well, they must have wanted it enough. They must have wanted victory enough over their opponent. And it's like, I thought about that for years, and I thought about what that means. And really what he was talking about, I think, was faith. Faith is a motive out of nowhere. So, in spite of what faces us, like in the metaphor of a football game, in spite of what faces us, our opponent, if we want victory enough, victory will give itself to us. It's the same thread, you could say, I think, as seek and ye shall find, that old saying, or knock and the door will be open for you. We could almost look at life like a line of scrimmage. And I was kind of thinking about this as an analogy for life in general. Life is like a line of scrimmage in a football game. And we're on the offensive. And we have the challenges in our lives as the defensive. We're born into the offensive because we're alive. Life itself is offensive to this world, to the processes which brought about life. Life itself is an offense, meaning life is an interruption of non-life. Before there was anything, that nothingness, just blankness, just happening, there came the advent of life into that inaction. When the advent of life happened, whenever that was, life became an interruption of the hitherto stagnant state of everything. Being an interruption, life is offensive in the sense that by living we gain ground. By living vitally and by living purposely, living with purpose, we're actually trying to push the boundary of our limitations. To tell you the truth, this world is such, not just that we ought not be, but also the world is designed to challenge. That by that challenge and through that challenge, strength is made. This is all part of the same picture. You imagine the imagery of a line of scrimmage in a game, a line of struggle. This is where the struggle happens. This is the revelation, here and now. Conscious life is the revelation. This is the opening of something being different, which is life. So all the way from the original, the origin of life, to up to now, up to the extreme variation of life, and in that variation, the extreme variation of individual lives and individual worlds, individual conditionings. That same thread runs through all of it. Life itself operates as a struggle so that strength may be made. because without struggle, there's no strength. Any weightlifter could tell you that when you fail to push yourself, when you fail to lift weights, when you slack off the grind, you lose muscle. Your muscle deteriorates because it's not put into use. It's not introduced. In other words, struggle brings about your strengths, your uniqueness. So it's for that reason that life as an operation, life as a scrimmage, produces your strengths that you may then push the boundaries on and on. Life is an offensive. When you fail to live life offensively, meaning when you fail to live it with purpose, and when you lose sight of that faith, the faith in victory, that's when the tides of failure, what was before your life, becomes again. We think of, for example, great men who lived. Alexander the Great comes to mind. Albert Einstein. You know, you could name a million different great men and women who really shaped. But they shaped this world. They shaped the structure of the way we actually live. Their ideas became tangible by the way we actually live, how we think, what we know about the universe, how we govern ourselves. These people created the world we're now living. In other words, we're living in their legacy. We're sleeping in the bed they made. We're at the yard line where these powerful units of consciousness, these powerful people of consciousness, these powerful bearers of consciousness led us. And we're at that yard line, and boom, here you are. It's no accident that we're here. Because in this timetable, we have to find it somewhere in ourselves, in the original offense, in the original interruption within each of us. There's that spark of interruption. Interrupt things. Stir them up. Grab the weights. Feel the burn in your arm. Because that is how strength is developed. And want it enough. And victory, meaning your overcoming of the things which would rather you just sit around, do nothing, be no one. Your overcoming of that won't be denied you by the universe. But that's the key. Maybe it's like a hole in the ice. The whole saying of, well, they had victory because they wanted it enough. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but I suspect that I'm not. Because it really is a truth that underlies everything, like the water beneath the ice. This idea of a spontaneous interruption of faith is what really produces tangible things in our world. And we can't lose sight of that. Faith is an interesting thing because faith stands alone. Faith is unjustified. Unjustified. Faith, you can be reasonable, you can be a rational, empirical person, but faith, by itself can stand. It can come from nothing, seemingly nothing. It can come out of nothingness. It can be acted upon for no reason. Or I should say, in spite of reason. In spite of reason, in spite of all these conditionings, in spite of this guy overcame it all. Because he believed and he saw what was not evident in front of him. That's really, I think, what the goal of faith is. That you don't just live your life according to what's in front of you. You don't live your life according to what your eyes feed you. You don't really see with your eyes. Well, you might see with them physically, but you understand with a heart of faith. And as long as we have that wheel, that impetus, I think is the word. As long as we have that, then we'll have wanted it enough. And it manifests itself. Because really our wanting to overcome these things, our failures, our inadequacies, really our wanting to overcome them was merely the process of those better things being born. And that feeling of birthing it is what faith is.